And so I'm now going to introduce to you the first decan of Gemini. And the lovers represents the Gemini card in the tarot deck. And what we see here is Adam and Eve, two figures. We're moving from one into two. Gemini is all about duplicity, multiplication. Why have one when you can have two? But what we also represents is a movement away from unity. We now experience separateness. We have the lungs, two lungs, we have two hands. And so the lovers is also inviting us perhaps to come back from our separation, to join together as we see the lovers. And we've got this very phallic volcano in the background coming together, this pre-orgasmic state of losing oneself in one another, into this state of love that takes us above and beyond this mortal realm, into higher states of consciousness, into unity, to become one. We merge again. So we can see this card as either descending or ascending. And what we have in the first decan of Gemini is Jupiter in Gemini in the Chaldean system. And Jupiter here is represented by the Wheel of Fortune in the tarot deck. The Wheel of Fortune bringing about change, movement up, movement down, but nevertheless a turning point. And we also see here in the cards animals that are fully embodied. There's a sense of learning and wisdom, very much a Gemini trait. Geminis are ruled by the intellect. There is multiplicity and complexity. There is intelligence with Gemini. They are at one with their thoughts, and it's about communication and the words that are used to convey the message. So here the books and the wisdom very much in line with Gemini. But also we see here this Jupiter level of not just expansion, but perhaps a rising, an elevation of consciousness, because we see the wings on these creatures here. And so this idea of perhaps meeting an elevated state, which I think ties in exactly with what we see here in the Lovers card. When two become one, we merge into a state that is higher. It's a higher aspect of self. And where is that also always within you? To merge your masculine and your feminine within yourself, to become one and rise with this state into something higher. So when we put these cards together, we get an interesting, curious card. We get the Eight of Swords. And here we see somebody blindfolded, bonded, and trapped perhaps. We've got these swords almost like a cage around them. And so how do we get from our lovers and our benevolent, expansive Jupiter to this Eight of Swords? Well, for me, we know that Gemini rules the intellect. We know that it's about thoughts and ideas. And perhaps with this expansion by Jupiter, we get so many thoughts and ideas in our head that we just don't know which one to work with. We're too busy trying to work it out, and we get lost and we get stuck. This can also be a card of where is our perception keeping us stuck? Where are our thought patterns? Where are our ideals? Where are our prejudices and our judgments keeping us from moving forwards, keeping us from change? So this is a card about perhaps going within and stopping all of these outside ideas and all of these external factors. Perhaps this card is asking us to look and find what we need within ourselves. So the original myth, the umbrella myth that I gave to Gemini was the myth of Castor and Pollux, the two bright stars in the Gemini constellation. And I think a good part of their story to illustrate this card is their birth. Because when the king and queen of Sparta lay together, they don't just produce one child. From that time, 4 children are born. Because when they lay together, They produce two mortal children. But then Zeus decides, and Zeus here we can interchange with Jupiter. When Zeus gets involved, the planet of expansion and the god Zeus decides he wants to lay with the Queen of Sparta, with Leda, and he takes the form of a swan and lays down with her. And from there, from that conception, we have two more children are born to Leda. So we have two mortal children from the mortal king of Sparta and two immortal children from Zeus. So already we have this sense of Jupiter in Gemini. Castor and Pollux are the brothers that come from this union. They also have two sisters. Castor and Pollux are known for their aptitude on the battlefield. And Castor, the mortal son, is very Gemini. He is a master horseman. And you can get the idea here of the mind over matter, the man over beast, over the lower aspect of self-mastery, as his ability on the battlefield will demonstrate. And he and his brother Castor, who is the boxer, are devoted to each other. There is a level of brotherly love that transcends everything else. And the two of them together become known by sailors as protectors. Sailors see them as beneficent protectors who shine lights of guiding lights through the chaos, through the storms. And I think this part of the narrative of their mythology also perhaps is echoed in this card, for we see perhaps the end of a storm. We see the rain that's fallen at her feet. And this woman perhaps has surrendered, like the sailors, to the outside world. She's no longer worrying about what's going on in her outside world. She's chosen to go within and to trust in the unknown. As the sailors put their trust in Castor and Pollux, we see the person here trusting in this benevolent protection, a higher ideal. And so this is a reading about Gemini, so I'm afraid I have more ideas for this. I'm not going to stop just there. I have another. It's not a myth, but I want to talk about Plato's Allegory of the Cave, because I believe this also really helps to illustrate and colour the card that we see here, our Eight of Swords. In Plato's Allegory of the Cave, we see prisoners chained against a rock. They can only face forward at the wall of the cave. And behind them is a fire, and between their rock to which they're chained and the fire behind them is a road or a path. And along that parade people with puppets or wooden cutouts of animals and of people and of objects. And they walk these along behind the rock, behind the prisoners. And the light from the fire against these puppets casts shadows against the rock face. And the prisoners are sat looking at this rock face. And so all they see are shadows of things. And these things aren't even the original things. These are shadows of copies. But this, nevertheless, becomes their perceived reality. And Plato, I believe, is suggesting that this is what we have in our own limited sense of perception. We imprison ourselves with our thoughts and our beliefs and our values and our judgments. And what we end up with is a very self-limiting world in which we create. So the idea in Plato's allegory is that one of the prisoners or some of the prisoners are set free and they escape. They are blinded by the light. And then they move upwards and outwards of the cave. Their eyes become accustomed, and they recognize that what they saw was not just a shadow, but it was a shadow of a copy of the original. And they realized that what they were deluded. Their perception was so limited. And now they were seeing the source of all things. And from this, they recognized that life had expanded exponentially. They'd reached greater levels of consciousness. They'd seen the light. And Plato suggested that once you've reached this state, there's no going back to the cave. There's no going back to seeing things the way they were. Once you've liberated yourself from your own cave, you can't go back. Once your consciousness has increased to recognize these higher levels, these higher states of being, then you can't sit and look at shadows and be among the shadows anymore. And yet Plato insisted that you should. As philosophers, he said it was important to go back to those people who were still imprisoned and explain to them that there is a whole other level of consciousness that awaits them when they stop seeing just with this one vision, this one level of perception. And those philosophers would face ridicule or condemnation, perhaps, by those that cannot see, because they cannot believe, they cannot get beyond their own thought forms, their own creations, what they can see, their perceived reality. And yet Plato insisted we should, and this is very Gemini again, this ability to communicate ideas and bring them forth and speak truth. And so here in our Eight of Swords, this first decan of Gemini, we see, yes, in its lower aspect, the ability to be completely overwhelmed and consumed with ideas to the point of being stuck. We see the idea of having limited perception and believing that that is all there is. But we also have the potential, perhaps, to forgo our sensory perception, to stop looking at the outside world. Perhaps this person has put themselves into this bonded state and they've gone within. They're not paying attention to that exterior false reality. They know there is something higher. They know there is something beyond this limited physical world. And perhaps by going within, they are able to unite their separateness into unity consciousness from their mortal version of self with all of its limited preconceptions and ideas to that higher self, that higher level of being, uniting masculine and feminine within and rising above to a higher state. So for this, this is quite a lot. So for this first decan of Gemini, the card here is saying, have a look, and perhaps you can spend these next 10 days having a look at what limiting beliefs you may hold. What is it that you see in your outside world and you believe to be true? And where may this simply be a shadow of what's truly, truly possible? And where can you start to go within and ignite the potential for so much more, to elevate your state to one that chooses above everything else love, and higher and higher and higher. It's time to set yourself free, get out of the cave, and have a wonderful day.